So hi everyone, and welcome to Cloud Lunch and Learn DevOps, Achieving Your DevOps Goals. We have Martin with us again. We're just here on a Thursday this week, but we'll be back on our Friday schedule next week. And Martin, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dana. So hi everyone, welcome again. So good news is this week we're going to continue talking about DevOps, and we're going to be talking about achieving your DevOps goals. Bad news is you unfortunately have me for an hour again. Sorry about that. But before we continue, just I want to thank everyone again for giving up a valuable hour of their time, and also the team at Cloud Lunch and Learn for putting on these events for free for everyone, and of course Dana for moderating. So thank you to those guys. So just very quickly, because I know some of you were on last week as well. So I'm a senior consultant with a managed service provider called Insono. I'm also an Azure MVP. My primary roles really business day-to-day wise around DevOps transformation, and also being an Azure SME around cloud native technologies. So pretty much most things Azure DevOps and developer related. You can find me technically in those things. I also blog and speak a lot as well. And a long time ago, I was I guess I still am a published author, but it was a long time ago. And that was a book on system center configuration, I think, yeah. So other community things that I do, so I also host a podcast called DevOps Squared, where we talk about all kinds of stuff related to DevOps, actually, all the way through the four main pillars. And I'm also an ambassador with the DevOps Institute, which is a great organization if you're looking to learn more and take certifications in DevOps as well. Those are all available through those guys. So it's sort of a semi recap on some of the things that we talked about last week. But one of the things that I want to look at first is talking about the foundations to DevOps success. And some of this, if you were here last week, will be very familiar to you in terms of what you heard me talk about last week. So one of the very first things is around leadership support. If you remember last week, we talked a couple of times about just how important it is for leadership at your organization to be fully behind what you do from a DevOps perspective. And that's not just day-to-day leadership, that goes all the way up to exec leadership as well. They have to be bought into what you are doing to back you up, and also provide that support back downwards and that belief, and give you the means to be able to transform. Next is around product management, and this is something that we didn't touch on a whole lot last week, but one of the keys to being successful with DevOps is having a proper product management strategy. And what do we mean by that? Fundamentally, I mean taking away the old style of delivery, which would be project-based, and moving across to more product-based methodology, where you have product management as a function. So you would have product managers. You may also have a team of business analysts gathering requirements, and you would have a number of different people in those product roles being able to support what you need to do and when you need to do it as a development team. So that's really quite critical to be able to be successful in DevOps as well. Next thing is around cross-functional teams, and there's a couple of different ways to look at this. So for quite a long time, we've talked about the ability to have T-shaped professionals, which is, if you imagine that the letter T, it's basically a broad set of skills with some deep specialism. So a broad set across with some deep specialisms in some areas. Now, if you look at, say, the DevOps Institute's upskilling report, which is a bit like the human element report of DevOps, a bit like Puppet do their State of DevOps report every year, the DevOps Institute send out a survey to various different people, anyone can take part, and they publish a report on the human aspects of DevOps. And one of the things that the report that came out earlier this year for 2020 highlighted was that there was a need to move from T-shaped professionals across to what we're calling E-shaped professionals. and they had specialisms around a number of areas, but that highlights the need for a successful DevOps engineer or a DevOps engineering team to have skills across a number of different areas, whether that be process and framework, whether that be technical skills, whether that be automation skills, and also personal skills as well. That's something that's really important. It's those collaboration and interpersonal skills that really set, for me, a DevOps engineer above what an infrastructure or a support engineer would be. It's that additional level of interpersonal skills, as well as the ability to understand the business. Next as well is security. So, you know, a lot of people are just getting used to the term DevOps, and then we start to throw out DevSecOps. So I actually think, you know, DevSecOps is a thing, but where you hear people say they do DevOps in inverted quotes, chances are they are probably doing some security aspects as well. I think it's more of a marketing term in a lot of ways than anything else personally. We should always be practicing good security practice, and we should always be following architecture best practices and all of those things. But adding that term in there and making it part of what people can pick up from various different sources, I think really drives home the message that this is a really fundamental part of your organization and needs to be at the forefront of what you do. So security specifically for this one is a really key one, and this is adopting some of the principles that are set out in DevSecOps, which is around shifting as many security aspects as possible across to the left of your organization. It's also around making sure that you secure your pipelines and making sure you secure your code repositories, and really moving the whole risk involved with deploying your products and your applications further away from production environments and giving more people the ability to look for and deal with security vulnerabilities rather than just the skilled security engineers that are within certain organizations. Actually, in a couple of weeks' time, the last one in this series for November, I'm talking about DevSecOps in a much deeper way. So we'll get to learn more about it then and exactly how we can do various different things. Next one is around automation. So if you remember back to last week, one of the things I said about technology in DevOps and specifically automation is that it is a really valuable part of DevOps, and you shouldn't forget the importance it puts and brings to your DevOps story, but it is not the be all and end all. However, it is a critical foundation to being successful when it comes to DevOps. It's really, really important to make sure that you are applying good automation principles to your DevOps workflows, and really making sure that you have the ability to be able to look at your business processes and look at having the ability to automate them for the better. Now, that's quite an open thing to say, but fundamentally, you want to be automating processes that have the biggest increase in value to your organization. And the way I say biggest value to your organization is that that process could be different for everyone on the call. It depends what your organization does and what value looks like to your organization. So there's no real way to generalize that statement or to make that statement specific. Sorry, it's more of a generalized statement. But that's something that shouldn't be overlooked, is the importance of introducing good automation practices within your teams. And then the last one is kind of fundamental to a lot of things we do in technology, but a lot of people forget it when it comes to DevOps, and I'm not sure why, but you have to be able to prove that you're doing the things you say you're doing, and you have to be able to gather information to be able to make yourselves better. You have to be able to have data to tell you where you need to improve. So good monitoring of what you're doing. So this isn't just monitoring of systems, although that is also a big part of the whole DevOps wheel, if you like. And this is monitoring of how you are performing and having suitable metrics and KPIs to be able to back up what you say you are going to do. So just moving on a little from here, there's some more about metrics a bit later on. So I want to talk about something that I've kind of come up with this term circle of DevOps adoption, and I'm by no means saying this is something that I've invented or coined the phrase. I'm certainly not lucky enough to be that popular. But this is how I think you should be going through your iterations when it comes to adopting DevOps. So we're going to look at all three of these phases all together at the minute. So we're going to start off with assess and look at what this means for your organization. So there are really, for me, when you start adopting and implementing or transforming towards DevOps within your organization, there are 7 steps that I think are really key to success. So the first one, and you know, a lot of people recognize this from life in general, actually, recognizing a problem exists, right? You cannot fix something if you do not recognize that a problem exists in the first place, okay? Once you know that you have a problem within your organization that needs fixing, what do we want to achieve, right? What do we want to fix? So it's really important to very clearly articulate and state, we know problem A exists in our organization, and this is what we want to do to be able to fix that problem. We then need to start stating when we're going to get there and how we're actually going to do it. So it's very important, critical points. If you think of the why, when, and how questions are quite common throughout various walks of life, the same kind of thing applies here. Once we then understand when we're going to get there, so what point in time are we going to get there, and make sure that's a realistic time frame, by the way. It's a really key point to mention, is that this will take a lot longer than you think. So if you think this is going to take, say, a year within your organization, I would add 50% to your estimate, and you will, probably be a bit closer to how long it's actually going to take. Next thing is, I said last week about tooling and automation being something we think about last, and we do from an implementation perspective, but you have to know up front which tools and which automation tools you're going to use. So what source control tools are you going to use? What tools are you going to use to scan your code for vulnerabilities in your pipelines? What release tooling are you going to use? What monitoring tooling are you going to use? All of these things need to be considered. There is a huge plethora of tools that support the DevOps ecosystem. The toolchain for DevOps is absolutely huge, and some of those products do very spot things themselves, and others do a broad range of things. So like Azure DevOps is a great example. Azure DevOps does everything from working section through the boards feature. It does documentation through the wiki. It also then gives us the ability to commit our code, build and release our code. And then also on top of that, we can add testing into there as well. And there's a whole host of stuff within those features that you can do. It's really full-featured tool. So it may be that that's the best tool for you to approach, or it may be that a combination of other tools is the best approach for you to use. And you really need to think about those up front with an eye on where you need to be, because it may be that when you state what you want to achieve, there are only specific tools that will help you get there. And it's really fundamental at this stage to understand whether that's a realistic prospect or not. So one of the next things sounds familiar, so third up from the bottom. What do we build and how do we deploy it? Right? The number of organizations I've been into where they fundamentally are not enough people understand what the organization builds from a software perspective and how that software is actually deployed. Right? This needs to be understood within your organization inside out, because if you don't understand what that process looks like, how can you then start to automate it, make it better, and start incrementally improving what you're doing? And then talking about measurement again, how do we measure value? And again, I can't overestimate the use of the word value. Value is really critical for this in me, because value is why we do what we do when it comes to DevOps. Providing value to the business, whatever that value is to your specific business, is why we implement DevOps. It's bringing additional business value, and we need to understand how we measure that, because when we measure it, we can understand what effect we are having upon the value to the business, and we can then understand how we keep evolving. It's really important to understand where you go next. A great thing with DevOps is it's like a conveyor belt or a treadmill. Something drops on it and it will roll to the back and fall off. Right, you need to keep going on that treadmill. You need to pick something up. You need to see it through to a natural conclusion, and then look at something else that will make you better. Right, DevOps is not a point in time thing that you can do, get to the end and say, right, we're done, everyone can get on with it now. It's a continuous process of evolution of how to improve what you are doing. There is always room for improvement when you are implementing processes, tooling, automating those processes. There are always more things you can automate within certain processes, because there's nothing wrong with having a process that is not 100% automated. That happens in business, that happens in manufacturing. Manufacturing is the greatest example we have in the world of where automation is key. And one of the principles of automation and improvement of process is lean. And the lean processes were born out of the manufacturing industry. So it's really, really important that we can learn some of the things that have happened in there. And this is really why the Japanese car market picked up the way it did all those years ago, because they introduced this level of technology never seen before. And that is why they started to overtake other countries for car production very quickly, because they were able to produce the same thing time and time again using machines much quicker than their competitors. And that is, we still feel the effects of that today by those Japanese car manufacturers still being huge players in the global market. So this is, that's one thing to think about when it comes to your organization. The other key thing is around assessment as well. So assessment is basically around making sure that we understand what the business's goals are. Okay, so there is no good as a technology team us going off and being able to do various different things with our products and our technology if those things that we do not help the business achieve their business goals. The business level KPIs and understanding what they are is really key. So as part of an assessment, you can do that and you can make sure that they are well understood throughout the team. We then need to understand how we as a technology team are going to help the business achieve those goals. So we need to understand that when we deliver something, we are delivering it because it will help the business achieve those goals. There's a huge number of things that could be. So, I'll kind of leave that to your own imagination to figure out what that means for your organization. Okay, think of the use of team topologies. We went through team topologies, excuse me, in last week's first episode of the series. And one of the things that we talked about is that teams can evolve through those various team topologies the more mature that they get. So using an assessment methodology will help you look at where a team is now. It will then let you feed in previous learnings, as we say on the slide there, from what we have been doing through our retrospectives with our product teams to then figure out how we can get better. And how we can get better may mean changing our team topology. And that is something that's really important to consider and something that's really important to think about as we go through and start to implement and get more mature. So we talked about identifying early parts of the tool chain as well and identifying those tools earlier. Again, as part of an assessment, we can do these things. So when we talked about those 7 steps to success, those 7 steps are things that you really should be looking at from an assessment perspective. Whenever you assess a team, whether that's one of your clients or whether that's internally within your organization, use those 7 steps as high-level points to make sure that you are aligning to those. So how well do we know our products and what does success look like? Those things need to be understood by every member of the team. The success of DevOps is fundamentally a bit like a piece of machinery with lots of cogs. Should those cogs all be working as one together and all moving around smoothly, then the results that you will get will be phenomenal. However, if one of those cogs is not quite functioning properly or doesn't understand what success looks like or doesn't understand what our product is, then things can start to slow down, they can start to creak, and ultimately they can start to break. So it's really important that those things are known throughout the organization by everyone involved. So out of assessment, you then start to come into transform. And transform is really where you start to make changes to your organization. So all of the things you learn about yourself during an assessment is now put into practice when it comes into transform. So as part of transformation, as we've said a couple of times, you need to support stakeholders and your own staff on the journey of transformation. So stakeholders within your business are going to be different depending on what it is that you do as a business and what your product is. Stakeholders could be some end users, but stakeholders could also be senior management, it could be team leaders, it could also be engineers. But it's also important to support the wider community on some of the changes that you are going to make. So it's really important to make sure that support is there when we are changing things around what people are doing. Some people don't like change. It's important to manage that effectively to make sure that it goes through smoothly and as productively as possible. Okay, so next thing is around planning to incrementally prioritize the resolution of backlog, bottlenecks. Sorry. So we talked about this again a tiny bit last week, but bottlenecks in some organizations are seen as blockers to being able to adopt DevOps. And to a certain extent, that's true. But some organizations, what differs between organizations that succeed in DevOps and those that fail is the ones that succeed see those bottlenecks as things that can be moved out of the way. They're opportunities to change. So it's really, really important that we make sure that we understand what those bottlenecks are and that we make sure that we have a plan in place to be able to deal with them in an incremental fashion. We may not be able to remove all of those bottlenecks straight away, but we may be able to get rid of a portion of them and then do some other things along the line. So the next thing is around the ability to scale up. So one of the things that gets executives and business leaders excited about DevOps is the promise of faster delivery. Being able to effectively scale without exponentially adding staff to your team to be able to then achieve their business goals is a really key thing. So thinking about it from a real fundamental business perspective, it's not really a great business model and it's not really an acceptable way to do business if every time you get a new client you have to hire one more person, because that starts to erode your bottom line, it starts to erode the margin that you're making as an organization. So having the ability to scale up to help achieve those goals without incrementally adding staff is a really, really key thing that you need to make sure that you take into account when you're doing the transformation. And how do we achieve that scalability? It's actually quite simple. It's through tooling and through automation, because automation is really the thing that gets us from manually running that process twice an hour to running it 10 times an hour. That's the ability to scale up. When we're doing all of the transformation process, we need to be strengthening the safeguards and the security of our environment. And what do we mean by this? So security is obviously fairly straightforward. Hopefully, this is security of the environment and customers' data, but it's also around safeguards around deployment as well. With DevOps comes great responsibility for developers and less of a need to interact with skilled operations people to be able to do those deployments. This is really important when it comes to making sure that safeguards are in place, because this is where operations come into their own as part of the deployment process around defining what those safeguards are, what good looks like from a deployment perspective. And this is a real opportunity to make sure that they can strengthen those areas, make them better and fix things that they know will cause issues and really start to drive people in the right direction. And then one of the last things in here, different parts of technology and different organizations talk about this all the time, but looking for meaningful wins. It will do the transformation team's confidence a huge amount of good if you start to look for meaningful wins within your organization. So these are things that we don't mean quick wins. So quick wins are sort of a different thing, but meaningful wins are things that we can influence and things that we can fix that will really start to make a difference to people's day-to-day operations or the value that we provide to the business. So if something comes up through your discovery process that will be, a few days work or something, but will start to increase value exponentially, then those are the things that you should be doing first. Getting support early on a long process and a long journey is really fundamental, because the longer this goes on, and this is a long process, don't forget, the longer this goes on without any real meaningful and tangible benefits being seen, the more your support will fade away. So it's important to keep getting those wins in and showing that progress is being made. Okay, so when we start to transform from a maturity perspective, there are lots of ways to do it, but there are ways that you should really think about it from a pragmatic and a scientific perspective as well. So just on the darker grey on the right hand side there, you'll see that we have levels of maturity. So it starts at the bottom where we say we're at an initial stage, then we move to managed, defined, measured, and then all the way at the top, which is the best one, which is optimized. So for each of these levels, and I can't fit all of the details on here to make it readable, unfortunately, but right at the top are our dimensions. So culture, strategy, automation, structure and process, collaboration and sharing. They're 4 big buckets, if you like, where there are very specific key things in there that will start to make a difference to how your organization operates. And most organizations will be in different places, along this journey. So it's really, really important from your perspective of knowing where you are as an organization. You need to know where you are in each of these areas, so you know where to start transforming in the future and where to make improvements into what it is that you're doing. There's no point, for instance, having really good automation processes and being at measured and optimized if everything else is at initial or manic. You need to start bringing those other levels up. For each of these, there are measurable sets of criteria that would define where you are on the scale. So when you start to look at these things in more detail and say, my organization or my team is there because we do this, this, and this, it's really important. We can see the levels of maturity there as well on the right hand side. And then the last point on here is around recommendations. And recommendations are really a key thing, because it's the recommendations that say when you've identified where you are in each of these columns, these are the things that you can do against that measurable criteria to then get you to the next level and make sure that you start to build your organization or your team to the next level of maturity. When you start to mature, that is again when you start to provide more value to the business. So that's a really important thing to remember, and that's a really important thing to consider. So this is something that's really useful as a takeaway to be able to take back to your businesses and start to look at. It's quite a common maturity chart as well, so you'll be able to search for this and get the full one with the criteria and some recommendations on as well. Okay, so last on the circle of adoption is around review. And this is really around making sure that once we've assessed what we need to do, once we've then transformed to do what we think we needed to do, let's go back and review, because unless we look and review what we've done, how do we know that we've succeeded? With an iterative approach that you get with agile methodologies and agile principles, it's really, really important to make sure that you take that step back. So from a team level, we call this retrospectives. It's really important that you take that step back and look at what you've achieved and how you've achieved it, and could we do better next time? What can we learn? What did we do really well? What should we stop doing as a team? All of these things, what went well, what didn't go well, all these questions are things that you should ask on a regular basis of your teams to make sure that you can then pick up and harness that feedback and put it back into an assessment and go around again. So as I was saying, the review is basically a measurement of maturity. So there are plenty of maturity assessments out on the internet if you search for them around DevOps. If you find the one that is more suitable to your business and team model, that is what works best, because there are very different degrees of detail available. You can go through those assessments with your teams on a regular basis. You can review data, feedback loop. And like we were saying, you can take that feedback into your transformation sprints and then start to really harness the information that you're picking up from the work that you're doing and start to course correct. This is a form of course correction when you're doing the adoption of DevOps. It's really important to make sure, like in any project, that you don't veer way off course before it's too late. It's really important to make sure that you take an opportunity to be able to get back on track wherever you can. So regular reviews and regular assessments are a great way to do this. And you can keep track of these as well. So I do this with teams that I do assessments with. We keep a track of the assessment scoring so that we can look back and plot on a chart where they've come from. So that's a really good thing for keeping people's spirits up on a long transformation journey, is realizing that, you know, guys, right at the start of this process, your maturity was 1.25. Here we are 6 months later, and you're already up to 3.5, 3.75. We don't have much further to go until we're at the level that we expected to be at and the goals that we set right at the beginning. So those are great tools that you can use that are really simple. You can just use Excel to do it. So I use an Excel scoring system and keep it plotted on a chart over time, so you can see exactly where needs to be worked on, where they've been historically, and where it looks like that team's going as well. Those things are really important. Okay, so how do we start to measure for success? So this is really the key thing. You know, how do we make sure we have metrics in place that can really start to tell us how we are doing as an organization and how my team's doing? So there are 3 key areas really that I think are really important when it comes to looking at assessing where you are from a performance and a metrics. And those are velocity, quality, and stability. Okay, so let's just think about those for a second. So velocity is obviously the way, the speed at which we are delivering work, but speed is no good if quality is not high enough, and you know that goes hand in hand with stability as well. So it's no good being, you know, great at delivering work. You know, if I ask you a question as a group of people on here, if your teams were producing 16 releases a month, but you had availability rates down in the 75%, that would not be good enough for business. But if you had a team that was doing 5 releases a month and no downtime, you would take that every single time. So it's around making sure that we find the right balance, and these metrics are all around highlighting where is the best place to focus your efforts going forward. This is what gives you the data to understand where you are at any point in time and look in the future at what you need to be doing to be able to move forward. So I'm not going to go through all of these individually. Everyone can hopefully read what's up there easy enough, but just a couple of really key ones from each area to talk about. So first of all, in velocity, and actually in general for velocity, you do need to be careful when you measure velocity, because some organizations and some leaders that don't understand truly what velocity means can start to use it as a measure to compare teams against each other, and that's not what we want to happen, because every team is an individual. The velocity of a team is their velocity. It's not a value that should be compared to another team's velocity. Each team works at their own speed due to a number of different factors, everything from personnel in the team all the way to the technologies that they are working on and the products they are working on. They are not comparable numbers between teams. It is simply an indication. Fundamentally, when you get velocity reports, it's an indication of this is what we committed to do and this is what we actually did. And it's that measure of what can help a team be more accurate at predicting how much work they're going to do, and be better at estimating. So it's something that goes back into the agile world as well. Moving on to quality. So a lot of people are now pretty good at looking at code quality and unit test coverage, but actually quality of code is much more than that. It's around making sure that things like defect density and defect aging. So defect density is a percentage, and it shows us the density of defects within the code base. The higher the number, the worse the metric. Same with aging. This is how long reported defects are active for. So the lower the number in that instance, the better that is, because that means you're fixing defects much quicker than a team with a higher number against that metric. And standards violations, finally, and this one is a good one to measure as well, because standards violations gives us a view exactly of how your developers are coding from a readability and a code quality perspective. So when we talk about coding standards, there's various coding standards out there. So if you're writing in .NET, for instance, you can use tools like ReSharper or FXCop or CodeMade, to be able to look at code quality and look at how that code is written against the standards that are defined. You can set metrics against that as well, and those metrics can be put into your pipelines to automate that scanning and validation process to make sure that code is only being released if it has a certain level of standards adherence, or it can go back to review. Those things are really key. And then stability is the traditional sense of the word. How stable is my environment? How many incidents are related to each deployment? That can start to give us a good idea of quality as well, actually. So for every release that we do, are there a specific number of incidents that are related to that release? That starts to help us understand the quality of the work being done underneath as well. And how many unapproved changes are being made in those environments? Unapproved changes, there was some Gartner research a long time ago I remember reading that said over 75% of instances of downtime within the organizations that they surveyed were actually down to unapproved changes or config changes within the environment. So it's really important to make sure that you have a method of capturing what those are and making sure that people are educated to ensure that they don't happen again. So it's really fundamental to making sure that you can measure these things, first of all, and that you can start to take things to the next level. Okay, so that is it for achieving your DevOps goals. So it's really around three things, just to recap. So first of all, it is around making sure that you understand what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it, and when you want to achieve it by. Understanding those three things will help you then do the right things in terms of transformation. The transformation is around making sure that you implement and do exactly what you set out to do. And then in the last phase, the review stage, is making sure that you review the work you've done and almost mark yourself on how well you're aligning to what you set out to do, and then making the necessary course corrections to go forward and assess, transform, and then review again. And it is that continuous cycle of all of the things that we've talked about in this session here, as well as the 7 steps to success right at the beginning, and the little wheel of fundamentals to success that will start to transform your organization into an organization that does DevOps okay to an organization that does DevOps well. And it's those organizations, you can look at various bodies of research on this. Those organizations that do DevOps well are the ones whose products are leaders in their field. There is a really good relationship between the quality of the development work that is done, the quality of the products, the quality of the processes related to how popular that business is, from an outside perspective. Then from an internal perspective, that starts to move into revenue. That starts to move into how happy your staff are and various other metrics that start to make you a great place for people to work. So actually, as a closing remark, what this starts to drive is, faster, more profitable business, hopefully, with what you're doing as a team when it comes to DevOps. A team which is a lot happier doing what they do, so making it a much better place to work. And that starts to translate into a product to the outside world that is really great to work with. New features are added all of the time. There are very few bugs. And it's one of those tools that you keep going back and using over and over again. And those are the tools that we all want to be using as consumers. More importantly, in our day-to-day lives, the kind of business I've described there are all businesses that we want to be working for as employees. So with that, thank you again for everyone listening this week. Next week, we're going to talk about how to build a successful DevOps culture. So everyone talks about DevOps culture. Exactly what is DevOps culture? So next Friday, it's back to next Friday next week. If you come along next Friday at the same time, you will be able to find out exactly what we mean when we say how to build a successful DevOps culture. We'll give you some hints and tips even as exactly how to do that. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Feel free to type questions, or feel free to come off mute if you would like to and ask directly. Okay, going twice. Okay. Okay, so Andrew, any basic tips on how to get started? Okay, so yes, definitely. So good question. So, okay, we've developed some best practice. Okay, so yeah, any tips on how to get started with DevOps is Andrew's question. So I think first of all, you have to understand the basics. I mean, that sounds like a bit of a politician's answer in some ways, but it's true. You can't have people within your organization starting to transform to this way of working if you don't have the people understand what it means to actually do this, because it's a very disruptive thing to a business. So going off and making sure that the important people within the organization that are going to drive this forward understand what it means to transform your organization to DevOps, I think is really fundamental and really key. So understanding that is really, really important. I think secondary to that, it's important. The best realization you can make is that everyone does DevOps differently. So if you start talking to so-and-so Just Eat, so-and-so at Deliveroo, so-and-so Airbnb, they're all organizations that do DevOps really well. But they all do it very differently, and they all do it very differently because the way they operate is different and their product is different. They are not all building the same fundamental product. So a good realization to make, and this is where you start to then think about the information you're seeing in a lot different ways. So the traditional would do is look at information presented to them about DevOps and think, how can I get that to work at my organization? That's actually not the way to look at it. The best way to look at DevOps is to think, how can I make my organization better? What problems exist in my organization? And that starts with what I talked about at the beginning. That's understanding what your business goals are. Once you understand what your business's goals are, you can then ask yourself the question, what can my team do to help achieve those business goals, and what blockers are in the way to preventing me from doing that? And once you understand those things, DevOps is actually quite natural in a lot of ways, that once you start to look around those things, you will start to be able to, exactly what you've just said there, once you understand those things, you'll be able to plan around your business objectives. And then you'll be able to go through the various things that I've talked about today, and being able to start implementing and adhering to those things that you found. One of the reasons it's really important to think about business goals is that business goals change as frequently as technology does, right? We're lucky in a lot of ways that technology changes so frequently. We're also not lucky in many ways because it's more to learn more often for a lot of people, but businesses have to adapt to the situation that's in front of them, right? And the businesses, all you have to do is take this year as a great example. Right? If you think there are businesses that set yearly goals, right? What good has a business done this year that has had yearly goals? They've probably struggled. Whereas where you have businesses that are either small enough to be able to make quick changes to those business goals or set goals on a quarterly basis, it's really important to make sure that you understand how the business ticks from that perspective, because that starts to influence how you start to operate as a team. Do we need to start working on a quarterly release cadence as a team because our business goals might change in the future? And we're not saying they'll change dramatically, but there are obviously certain things within every business environment that will mean that some things that you do will subtly change. So the key things there, just to summarize some of Andrew's questions there, are really to understand what DevOps is fundamentally, understand that just because your competitor or another organization is doing DevOps that way doesn't mean that will work for you. Chances are it maybe won't. There'll be things that you need to change. So think of it from the inside out. Look to understand the business goals, look to build a plan around what those business objectives are, and then start to think about how you can react to changes yourself without breaking your model. And it's really important to then think about that process of apply, transform, and review. If you do that cycle in step with your organization, you're able to react to changes that are happening within the organization. So that's really, really good question. Okay, any other questions from anyone? Okay, great. So with that, we'll call that there for today. So thanks again for everyone joining, and hopefully we'll see you next Friday when we learn about building a successful culture.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Martin.
No problem. So I just seen something come in about good books, actually. So the obvious one to start is the Phoenix Project. It's probably been mentioned on every single call about DevOps since the beginning of time. But the Phoenix Project is a great start. And as is, I can't remember what it's called. Let me find the name of it quickly. The Devops Handbook by John Willis is a great one. And yeah, the Phoenix Project by Gene Kim is obviously a good one. And then one of the other ones that I read recently, actually, that was really good is DevOps for the Modern Enterprise, which is Mirko Herring, 2018. So those are all available on Amazon as various different ebooks and hardbacks. So yeah, free great books. Okay. So yeah, if there's no more questions, then we will let you have 9 minutes of your Thursday back. So hopefully, those help, and look forward to speaking to you all virtually next week. So thank you again.